Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something I think we all experience: bad decisions.
Uh-huh.
We're going to be looking at this article called The Psychology of Bad Decisions: How to Think Smarter.
Oh, you know, sometimes I feel like my brain is working against me.
Yeah, no, what do you mean?
So hopefully this article will give us some insights.
Yeah, the article kind of goes into how our brains are wired and how that can sometimes lead us to make choices we later regret.
So it's not just me. There's a scientific reason I go for the cookie over, my long-term health goals sometimes.
Totally. Yeah, it's
It,
not just you. And it all comes down to the interplay of different parts of our brains. So think of your prefrontal cortex as like the CEO,
okay.
trying to make those logical, well thought out decisions.
Right.
But like any good CEO, it has advisors, some more helpful than others.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Who are these advisors?
Well, there's the amygdala, the emotional one.
Okay.
It's all about like quick reactions and gut feelings.
It's the advisor that screams danger when you see a spider, even if it's harmless.
Oh, so that's why I sometimes react without thinking.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So who else is on the board?
And then you have the striatum, the creature of habit.
Okay.
Loves routines. It pushes you towards familiar paths,
Uh-huh.
even if those paths have led to bad decisions before.
Right, right.
So think of it as the advisor who always orders the same thing at a restaurant,
Okay, I got it.
even if there are more exciting options on the menu.
This is fascinating. So it's like our brains are wired to take these shortcuts, but they don't always lead to the best outcome.
Exactly. And then on top of that, we have these things called cognitive biases,
Okay.
which are like mental traps that can further distort our decision-making. And one of the big ones is confirmation bias,
Okay.
where we tend to look for information that confirms what we already believe. It's like only reading reviews of a movie you've already decided you like.
Oh, I totally do that all the time, especially with politics, I feel like. I tend to just read things that support my existing views.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not just politics. It pops up everywhere in relationships, investments, even simple things like choosing a vacation destination.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So how do we stop doing that? How do we avoid that trap?
Well, one helpful tip is to actively seek out opposing viewpoints.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So instead of just reading articles that align with your perspective, try reading articles that challenge your views. It might be uncomfortable at first, but it can help you make more informed and objective decisions.
That's a great tip. It's like getting a second opinion from a doctor, right?
Exactly.
You want to make sure you're considering all sides of the story.
You got it. Now, another tricky bias to watch out for is the sunk cost fallacy.
The what?
Sunk cost fallacy. This is where we get stuck in a situation just because we've already invested time, money, effort,
Right.
even if it's clearly not working out.
Oh, I think I'm guilty of that one too. I've definitely stayed in a job longer than I should have because I felt like I'd invested so much already.
Yeah, it's a common trap. Think of it like this. Imagine you buy a ticket to a concert,
Okay.
but then you get sick on the day of the show.
Right.
The sunk cost fallacy would have you going to the concert anyway, even though you're miserable,
Yeah.
just because you already paid for the ticket. A better approach would be to acknowledge the loss and focus on what would make you feel better in the moment, staying home and resting.
That's such a great analogy. I'm starting to see how these biases can really mess with our decision making. What else is there?
Well, there's the overconfidence bias. This is where we overestimate our abilities or knowledge,
Uh-huh.
which can lead us to take on more risk than we should.
So like that friend who thinks they can win every game of trivia even though they haven't studied.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the entrepreneur who's convinced their startup will be the next big thing, despite the odds being stacked against them. This bias can be especially dangerous in situations where the stakes are high.
It's interesting how this article links this to the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the less competent we are in a particular area, the more likely we are to overestimate our abilities.
Yeah, that's a really key insight. It reminds us to be humble about our knowledge and to always be willing to learn and grow.
So we've talked about confirmation bias, sunk cost fallacy, and overconfidence bias. What other mental traps are there?
Well, there's the availability
Availability what? Okay.
which is the tendency to judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind.
Okay.
For instance, after seeing a news report about a shark attack, you might be more afraid of swimming in the ocean, even though statistically you're more likely to be injured in a car accident on the way to the beach.
Oh, so it's like how media coverage can really skew our perception of risk.
Exactly.
Like scary headlines, they can really stick with you.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important bias, loss aversion.
Loss aversion.
Yeah. This is the idea that the pain of losing something is psychologically more powerful than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value.
Oh, that's interesting. So we're more motivated to avoid losses than we are to pursue gains.
Precisely. Think about it this way. Would you rather win $100 or avoid losing $100?
I'd probably avoid losing it.
Most people would choose to avoid the loss, even though the outcome is technically the same.
That makes a lot of sense. It explains why people get so attached to their possessions, even if they don't use them anymore. It's like they don't want to lose them.
Exactly. Loss aversion can be a powerful force in our decision-making. It can make us hold on to things longer than we should, whether it's a failing investment, a job we hate, even a relationship that's no longer serving us.
So we've talked about a lot of these cognitive biases that can kind of lead us astray, these mental traps.
Yeah.
But the article doesn't stop there, right? It goes on to explore how our emotions can really hijack our decision-making abilities.
You got it.
Our brains are laying these traps, and then our emotions come in and kind of add fuel to the fire, make it even harder to make those good choices. So let's get into the emotional roller coaster.
Okay, let's do it. So think about a time when you had to make like a big decision under a lot of stress.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you were facing a tight deadline at work or dealing with a family emergency.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. I feel like when I'm stressed, my brain just goes into overdrive, and I end up making decisions I regret later, like impulsive decisions.
Yeah, that's because when we're under stress, our bodies go into like that fight or flight mode.
Right.
And our brains, they start to prioritize those quick reactions over like thoughtful analysis.
Right.
The article calls this stress and decision fatigue.
Okay.
It's like trying to solve a complex math problem while running a marathon.
It's like I'm starting to see this pattern that our brains aren't really meant to make good decisions when they're under pressure.
Not always. It's important to be aware of this and like try to create a calmer environment for decision making when possible. The article suggests things like taking breaks, getting enough sleep,
Right.
practicing mindfulness to reduce those stress levels.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're clearing your mental workspace before starting a big project.
Right. And speaking of mental workspaces, let's talk about the ongoing battle between instant gratification and long-term goals.
Uh-oh.
This is where our emotions can really hijack our best intentions.
Oh, tell me about it. I am the queen of choosing the immediate reward over the delayed benefit.
Right.
Like, give me the cookie now, I'll worry about it later.
I know, we all struggle with this.
Yeah.
Our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, so it's natural to gravitate towards things that feel good in the moment.
Right.
But the article offers a helpful tool to combat this.
Okay.
The 1-10-10 rule. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of that. I don't know that I fully understand it, though.
It's a simple but powerful way to put your decisions into perspective.
Okay.
So when faced with a choice, ask yourself, how will this decision impact me in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years?
Okay, so if I'm considering having that extra cookie, I would ask myself, how will I feel in 10 minutes? Probably pretty satisfied. How will I feel in 10 months?
Right.
You know, maybe a little guilty if I haven't been exercising. How will I feel in 10 years? Potentially facing health consequences.
Exactly.
If this is a habit.
By considering the long-term consequences of your choices, you can make decisions that are more aligned with your overall goals.
I love that. It's like taking your future self into consideration when making a choice in the present.
Right.
Like, what would my future self think of this decision?
And speaking of influences, we can't forget about the impact of social pressure
Oh, yeah.
on our decision-making.
Peer pressure.
As much as we like to think we're independent thinkers, we're constantly being influenced by the people around us.
Oh, absolutely. I know I've made decisions in the past just to fit in, to avoid being judged, even when I knew deep down it wasn't the best choice for me.
It's a natural human tendency. We're social creatures, and we're wired to seek approval and avoid rejection.
Right.
But it's crucial to be aware of this influence
Uh-huh.
and to make sure we're not sacrificing our own values and goals in the process.
So it's like finding that balance between being true to yourself and navigating the social landscape,
Exactly.
which can be tough,
It can be really tough.
especially when you're feeling the pressure from like peers or, you know, people you look up to or whatever, authority figures. So do you have any advice for dealing with that?
One helpful strategy is to kind of reframe the situation.
Okay.
Instead of seeing it as going against the group, you think of it as standing up for what I believe in.
I like that.
This can help you feel more confident and empowered in your decision.
Yeah, it shifts the focus from conformity to authenticity.
Right. And remember, you don't have to be confrontational about it. You can simply state your position clearly and respectfully without feeling the need to justify yourself.
Yeah, be assertive but not aggressive.
No, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how stress, instant gratification, and social pressure can all kind of cloud our judgment. But the article doesn't just leave us hanging with all these pitfalls, right?
No. As
It gives us some tools to help us get better, right? To help us make smarter
You
decisions.
got it. The article isn't just about identifying the problems, it's also about providing solutions.
Right.
And one of the key takeaways is the importance of having decision frameworks in place.
Decision frameworks? That sounds kind of intimidating.
Not at all. They're actually quite simple and intuitive.
Okay.
The article mentions a couple of popular ones, including the 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle,
Okay.
and the Eisenhower matrix.
Okay.
These frameworks can help you prioritize your tasks and make decisions more efficiently.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this.
So the 80-20 rule suggests that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts.
Okay.
So the idea is to identify that crucial 20% and focus your energy there.
Okay.
And this can be applied to everything from, your work tasks.
To your personal goals.
So it's about figuring out like which actions will have the most impact and then focusing on those.
Right.
I like that. So what about the Eisenhower matrix?
The Eisenhower matrix helps you categorize your tasks based on urgency and importance.
Okay.
It's a simple grid with 4 quadrants: urgent and important, important but not urgent, urgent but not important,
Right.
and neither urgent nor important.
Okay.
So you'd write down all your tasks and then place them into the appropriate quadrant based on their urgency and importance.
So like if I have a to-do list, I could kind of go through and put them into those different boxes.
Okay.
Is that what that do for me?
This helps you visualize your workload
Okay.
and make decisions about how to allocate your time and energy.
Right.
The goal is to focus on the tasks that are both urgent and important, and to delegate or eliminate the tasks that are not.
Oh, okay. So it's like really helping you prioritize.
Exactly. And here's another powerful tool from the article: the scientific method.
The scientific method. Okay. You might think of the scientific method as something you learned in school, but it can actually be applied to everyday decision-making.
I don't usually think of myself as like conducting experiments when I'm trying to decide, what to have for dinner.
Right. It's not about literal lab experiments. It's about bringing that same curious and analytical mindset
Right.
to your decisions. So instead of just going with your gut, you'd gather information, consider multiple options, test out your hypotheses, and evaluate the results.
So it's like being more objective and data-driven in your decision-making.
Exactly.
Okay.
And along those lines, the article also emphasizes the importance of thinking in probabilities rather than absolutes.
Probabilities. What do you mean by that?
Well, instead of saying, this project will definitely succeed, you'd say, based on past data, there's a 70% chance this project will succeed.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's acknowledging that uncertainty of the future.
Yes.
And kind of like making the best decision you can with the information available.
Precisely. It's a more realistic and nuanced way of thinking about decision-making.
I'm starting to see how all of these tools and strategies from the article can really help us become more aware of our decision-making process.
They really can. And perhaps the most important takeaway from the article is the power of learning from our mistakes.
Oh, that's a good one.
Instead of viewing setbacks as failures, we need to reframe them as valuable learning opportunities.
Yeah, like embrace that growth mindset.
Exactly. The article calls this cognitive flexibility,
Okay.
the ability to adapt our thinking and behavior in response to new information and changing circumstances.
Like that famous Thomas Edison quote, "I haven't failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work."
Exactly.
It's just part of the process.
It's a powerful reminder that setbacks are not the end of the story, but rather valuable stepping stones on the path to success.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the psychology of bad decisions, I guess the takeaway is that understanding these cognitive biases and emotional influences is really essential for us to make better decisions going forward.
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect or never making a mistake, but rather about becoming more aware of the mental traps that can lead us astray.
Right.
By understanding how our brains work, we can start to make more conscious and intentional decisions.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here today, but there's so much more to learn about this. It's fascinating.
I agree.
The whole world of decision making.
But this deep dive has given us a great foundation to build on. And now that you're aware of these cognitive biases and emotional influences, Which bias do you think has the biggest impact on your own decisions?
Well, that is a great question. I think for me, I'm really susceptible to the sunk cost fallacy. I definitely have stayed in situations longer than I should just because I didn't want to admit I made a mistake or something like that.
Yeah, it's a common one. And it can apply to so many areas of life, like relationships, projects, even hobbies. We can get so attached to the time and energy we've invested
Right.
that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's like throwing good money after bad, right?
Exactly.
Keep investing, even when it's clear you should just walk away.
Exactly. It's a tough one to break free from. But with awareness comes the power to change. So now that you're aware of this bias, you can start to catch yourself when it's happening and make more objective decisions.
That's what I like about all this.
Yeah.
Even if it's kind of a bummer to realize all these ways that we can make bad decisions, at least now we're aware of it, so we can hopefully make better decisions going forward.
Absolutely. It's like we've been given a secret decoder ring for our own minds.
Oh, I like that.
And we can start to see the patterns in our thinking and make adjustments to avoid those mental traps.
Yeah, it's like we're becoming more savvy players in the game of life.
Exactly.
You're learning the rules, you're developing strategies.
And remember, it's a continuous learning process. We're all going to make bad decisions from time to time.
Right.
The key is to be kind to ourselves, learn from those experiences,
Of course.
and keep striving to make better choices in the future.
Well, I think this has been a really great deep dive into the psychology of bad decisions. I know I've learned a lot. I feel like I can use this information to make better
Yeah,
choices.
I'm so glad to hear that. Remember, awareness is the first step towards change.
Right.
By understanding these biases, we can start to make more informed and intentional choices
Yeah,
and hopefully lead to a more fulfilling and successful life.
absolutely. So until our next deep dive, stay curious, keep learning, and remember every decision, good or bad, is an opportunity for growth.